Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie and today I'm going to be showing you Mooncat's Fallen collection. As you can see, this is a massive 10-piece lineup with shades inspired by the cycles of death and rebirth found in nature in finishes like multi-chromes, shimmers, magnetics, and thermals. So as always, I will save more of my thoughts for the end after comparisons. I first want to give a big thank you to Mooncat for sponsoring this video, but for now, let's just get into the swatches. The first polish we have is Sagebrush, a sage green thermal lacquer with holographic glitter. So as you can see here in the cold state, it's this deeper ivy kind of color and it transitions to a lighter sage when warm, which you'll see in a minute. I know I give thermals a hard time since they have a shorter shelf life, but wow, did I love this one. These sagey kind of greens are just so beautiful and soothing. I love the deeper ivy that it transitions to. I mean, both colors are just so stunning. I obviously also really loved that dainty hollow, especially how it doesn't get lost in the base since this is a little bit more creamy and full coverage. It was fully opaque in just 2 coats. The other thermal in the collection is Twilight Sonata, which is a midnight blue purple thermal filled with blue shimmer. This one transitions from a really deep blurple kind of base color to this brighter, almost amethyst purple when warm. This one is another beauty. I just personally love how it looks in the cold state as seen here, being this deeper midnight blue purple kind of color, and especially how that bright blue shimmer just pops against it. But seeing that purple in the warm state is just so stunning. I love the natural gradient that it creates. This one had another really smooth formula that was easy to apply. I found that it was a touch more sheer than Sagebrush was, but I still found this one opaque in 2 coats. Then we have Nocturne, a dusky, dark teal green magnetic with bronze flakies that reveal a copper magnetic stripe. So I was definitely surprised to learn that this one was a teal green color because as you can tell from the bottle, the copper magnetic shimmer is just so strong. I would describe this one as having more of a jelly kind of base. So you can see on the first coat here, it's a lot more sheer and your nail line is more noticeable, especially if you're doing a cat eye effect. It did have a nice formula though, and since it was so dark, I ended up just doing 2 coats, though I could still make out my nail line, so you might want to do a 3rd coat if you want even more full coverage. Of course, I also have to show you this with the velvet effect, which is my preferred way of wearing magnetics. The easiest way that I do them is by holding the magnet on the side of my nail, painting my coat, and then moving the magnet away from my nail, which usually is enough, but sometimes I'll also move the magnet to the other side of my nail, and you can just see how the magnetic pigment shifts around. I thought this one had a beautiful velvet effect since it had that jellyish base, and here it is with no effect for comparison. The other magnetic in the collection is called Fields of Lavender, and this one is described as being a mauvey purple base with a red to orange magnetic shimmer. This one had another slightly jelly leaning formula, so you can see how sheer it is on the first coat where it's a little bit patchy, not super impressive, but it still had a very easy to work with formula that was very smooth. I thought that this one would be built up to opacity in just 2 coats, especially since it's a little bit of a darker color, but after doing the 2nd coat, I feel like I could still see some light spots or patchiness. So depending on your nail length and application, I think it's just safe to call this a 2 to 3 coater. I personally went in with a 3rd coat as seen here, and that definitely evened out the base a lot more. And I really like this one. I think the color combination is so beautiful and cozy, especially for fall. I didn't do a great job with the velvet effect here, but I think it came out a lot better in my skittle, which you'll see soon. This is 2 coats of each, by the way, and I feel like it looks a lot more full coverage here than doing a cat eye effect. The next shade we have is Witch Hazel, which is described as a peach yellow shimmer lacquer that color shifts between shades of peach, yellow, and green. I personally would say that this one has a sheer peachy pink kind of base color, and the shimmer shifts from yellow to green. If you're familiar with me and my taste, you already know this one is the one that took my breath away. I absolutely love gold shimmers in sheer ethereal kind of bases, and I am just obsessed with this peachy pink color. Granted, it is very light and sheer. The actual peach color is hard to read on the nails. It's almost just overpowered by the gold shimmer, which personally I am a fan of, but I know not everybody loves yellow leaning nail polishes. I thought it was beautiful though. So this one is one of those colors that won't ever reach full opacity because of how light and sheer it is, but I am showing it in 3 coats anyway. I also did kind of struggle capturing the green shift on camera, like maybe you can see hints of it. It is a lot more noticeable in real life though. Then we have Jewel Beetle, which is just described as a multi-chrome lacquer that shifts between shades of pink, orange, and green, which I'm sure you already saw in the bottle. This one had another super smooth, easy to apply formula. It was a little bit on the sheer side though, so even though the shimmer is so packed, in certain angles you could still see some nail line, so it's definitely not a one coater. I personally found this opaque in 2 just because of how much shimmer is in here, but I think if you look closely you could see some nail line, but it's just not enough for me to do a 3rd coat. This one was so shifty. I mean, you can just see from the edges of my nail it goes from pink to orange, but here it is with adjusted lighting so you can see that green. The next shade we have is Memento Mori, which is an ivory lacquer filled with orange shimmer. So I was kind of surprised to see this described as an ivory because I would have just called this white. Maybe there is a little drop of gray in there, but I feel like it's still very bright. Either way, this one was another favorite of mine. I just love these shimmer kind of formulas. I personally would say that this has more of a crelly kind of formula where you can see from the first coat alone, it was very smooth and easy to apply, very even coverage as well. It's just very sheer, especially for being like a white shade. So similar to Witch Hazel, this is going to be another polish that no matter how many coats you do, you aren't really going to get it to be fully opaque unless you layer it over a cream or a blurring base coat. I do love how it looks on 3 coats though, as seen here. It just has this milky, cloudy kind of base, and the shimmer is just so stunning. Here it is in adjusted lighting because I noticed that it had this shift to yellow, which I thought was just so pretty. Up next we have Poems for a Harvest Moon. This one is a bright orange crelly lacquer filled with pink shimmer. This is definitely the brightest color in the collection, and I think I would describe it as a very warm pumpkin orange. I don't know if it has a coral undertone or if it's just the pink shimmer that makes it lean that way, but I personally would just say it's a very warm leaning shade. I think on camera especially, it just looks a lot brighter, almost neutral, or maybe like a yellowy orange, but that's definitely not how I see it, especially in real life. This one had a similar formula to Memento Mori, being that shimmer, crelly kind of consistency. So it was sheer on the first coat and it builds up beautifully and evenly on 2 or 3 coats, depending on your preference. But because this is that crelly kind of formula, you are still going to see some nail line even after 3 coats. The next shade we have is After the Rain, and this one is described as a semi-sheer periwinkle lacquer filled with orange shimmer. So even though it is described as periwinkle, I would say that it leans a little bit more on the purple side, but either way, it is absolutely gorgeous. No surprise, this is another favorite from the collection because, again, I just love these shimmery kind of formulas, but the color is especially stunning. It's basically the periwinkle version of Memento Mori, since I'm pretty sure it has the same orange shimmer. And like Memento Mori, this one had another super smooth formula that was very even coverage, even on the first coat alone, and it builds up beautifully in 2 and 3 coats, but you are still gonna see some nail line. I think you could get away with this in 2 coats if you want that ethereal, dreamy kind of look, but I personally love this in 3 just because the base color is intensified and it is so stunning. And here it is with some adjusted lighting so you can see that shift to yellow. Rounding out the collection, we have Dark Night of the Soul. This one is a bright purple lacquer filled with blue shimmer. This one is another stunner. The shimmer is just so fine and densely packed. So I want to say it almost gives it a metallic kind of look, but not really at the same time. It's just hard to explain, but I just love how glowy that blue shimmer is against this deeper, moodier purple base. This one had another super smooth formula that was so easy to apply. On the first coat, it was a bit sheer, and you can definitely see more of that purple base color. Here on 2 coats, it does get a little bit deeper, but just kind of overpowered by all of that blue shimmer. So it really makes it very blurple leaning, which I think is just so beautiful. And here is the first half of the collection worn as a skittle. I'm wearing 2 coats of each so you can get an idea of how sheer some of those polishes are, mainly Witch Hazel and Memento Mori. I'm wearing Nocturne on my ring finger with the velvet effect, and I do still see a decent amount of nail line, so I would recommend doing a 3rd coat for that one, but I think the thermals are full coverage on just 2. So unfortunately, I didn't have direct sunlight for these skittle clips, but I think the shimmer still stands out really nicely even in brighter indirect kind of lighting. You only really lose it in more lower lighting as seen here, especially in the shades Memento Mori and Twilight Sonata, but you still see those flakies in Nocturne, and obviously Witch Hazel is so glowy and so golden. And here is the second half of the collection worn on my other hand. Again, I'm wearing 2 coats of each with the velvet effect on Fields of Lavender on my index finger. I did this the night before and I feel like it still looks very velvety, so I do love that. I also got some slight bubbling on Jewel Beetle, but that was from my top coat, so nothing with the polish, that was just my fault. So yeah, for the majority of these shades, I definitely think they are passable on 2 coats. Obviously my nails here are a little bit shorter than on my left hand, but there is still a decent amount of free edge, so you definitely can see nail line, especially with After the Rain on my middle finger and Poems for a Harvest Moon on my ring. Again, I think these look great. The shimmers are just so beautiful with how they stand out. Obviously they are going to be a little bit lost in lower lighting, but that's where Jewel Beetle shines. It is just so shifty. I also have full hand swatches for you guys. This is 2 coats of every shade in direct sunlight this time. I did the cat eye effect with both of the magnetics, so you can hopefully get a better idea of the coverage on these shades. So finally, getting into comparisons, we're starting with Sagebrush and obviously looking at it next to Devil's Ivy from the Seasons of Persephone collection earlier this year. I was convinced that this was going to be a dupe for the warm state of Sagebrush, but as you can see, it is not. I would say that Devil's Ivy is a little bit more dusty and muted and also more sheer. Then for Twilight Sonata, I was immediately reminded of Misery is My Favorite Color, which was from the Inner Apocalypse collection last winter. I want to say they have the same blue shimmer, but the base is a little bit lighter in Misery. So I thought to match the moodier, darker base color, I could show this next to Nightcrawler, which was from the same collection, but that one has a purple shimmer. The bases kind of did look like dupes side by side in the bottle, but seeing them on the nail, they definitely do not compare. I think the cold state of Twilight Sonata looks a lot closer to Misery is My Favorite Color, but just darker. Then for Nocturne, I wanted to quickly show this next to Whiskey Sunrise because I thought that it kind of had a similar coppery shimmer, but Whiskey Sunrise is just a lot more red leaning and obviously doesn't have that teal base color, so I thought to better match that, I could show it next to Pangea, which as you can see has that tealy blue kind of base, and it also has this reddish shimmer particle, but it's just very different different. So I thought the closest maybe to Nocturne was Illusionist, which is another magnetic. That one is in more of a blackened burgundy kind of base though, and it has these holographic glitters instead of these coppery golden flakies. But other than that, the shimmer is almost the exact same as Nocturne, so that's really the only thing they have in common. I definitely wouldn't call these dupes. Then for Fields of Lavender, here it is next to Lovebomb, which is also from the Seasons of Persephone collection. I thought these were going to be a lot more similar, but Lovebomb has a purple shimmer and more of a mauvey brown base. Then for Memento Mori, I knew I had to show this next to What a Brilliant Nose, which was from the Nightmare Before Christmas collab. Again, I thought these were going to be dupes, but What a Brilliant Nose is a brighter white kind of base with a pinky purple shimmer. Then for Witch Hazel, I wanted to show this next to Flight of the Monarchs, which is one of Mooncat's most iconic polishes. It is this golden orangey shimmer that's in a slightly purple tinted base, which I know is hard to see in the bottle, but once you see it on the nail, you can kind of see that when I move my thumb away from the light. But just from the shimmer alone, these are not dupes because Witch Hazel is more yellow and Flight of the Monarchs is more orange. So even though Witch Hazel is a peachy color, I still wanted to compare it next to some other shades like Curse of Calypso and High Fructose, which both have these golden yellowy shimmers that also kind of shift to green in extreme angles. But those two shades have these like pinky lavender kind of base colors, so I want to say that they're like related. If anything, I think Witch Hazel looks a lot more similar to Curse of Calypso. There's just a slight difference where I think the shimmer is a little bit larger in Witch Hazel and a little bit more peachy too. It looks more like a lime yellow in Curse of Calypso. Not to mention that one has that pinky lavender base, so it's a little bit cooler leaning than Witch Hazel too. And again, in more indirect light, Witch Hazel does shift to a green kind of shimmer, but it's not as strong as these other two. Then for Jewel Beetle, I wanted to show this next to Am I Everything You Fear from the Songs of Sirens collection. They kind of have a similar magenta pink shimmer, but Am I Everything You Fear is more blue while Jewel Beetle is more green. And then I remembered Dragon Scales, which is this multi-chrome flaky. This is 3 coats on a swatch stick, so even though Dragon Scales is this micro flaky formula, they do have the same exact multi-chrome color shifts. There's a little dainty hollow in Dragon Scales too. Then for Poems for a Harvest Moon, I was immediately reminded of Stolen Ambrosia, which came out in the Underworld collection last year. That one's another shimmery, warm, pumpkin kind of orange, but the shimmer is more of a yellowy orange. It's not pink like Poems. I think I would say the base color in Stolen Ambrosia is a little bit more red leaning too, and it's also more sheer. This is 2 coats of each. And then for After the Rain, I wanted to show this next to Sweet Nightmare, which is a cream. Obviously, there's no shimmer or anything in here, so I know they weren't going to be dead on dupes, but the colors are very similar, so I just wanted to show you how these looked being different formulas. This is 2 coats of each, and obviously Sweet Nightmare is fully opaque, while you can see just how sheer After the Rain is, and I thought to do a little layer of After the Rain over Sweet Nightmare, so if you do have an orangey kind of shimmer, it just still wouldn't really recreate the look of After the Rain since it's so sheer. Then I remembered Into the Wishing Well, which I would say is probably the closest to After the Rain. They definitely look like they could be dupes or very, very close in the bottle, but on the nail, there definitely is a difference. Into the Wishing Well is a little bit darker and maybe more pigmented, or just because it's darker, it covers up a bit more of your nail line. There's also a dainty hollow glitter in that one. There's no hollow in After the Rain, and the shimmer also shifts to green instead of yellow. So similar vibes for sure, but not dupes. And lastly, for Dark Night of the Soul, I was immediately reminded of A Most Destructive Melody, which was from the Songs of Sirens collection. That one looks like it could be a dupe here under this lighting because you just see that bright blue shimmer, but A Most Destructive Melody is a lot more multi-chromatic, so you're going to see these different color shifts. You can already kind of see this purple shift a lot more apparent towards the edges of my nail, and again, it's going to be more obvious with more extreme lighting, but even for the base color, I would say that it's a little bit deeper and more purple too. So similar, but not dupes. So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons for Mooncat's Fallen collection. As always, I can't wait to hear what you think of this release because I am loving it. I know it's so dramatic, but I gasped when I saw the email brief for these. I just instantly fell in love with the theme of growth and rebirth and shedding things that no longer serve you. I know this collection is deeply personal to Michelle, and I think she did just such a great job bringing these concepts to life with these shades. I just love when a maker can tell a story with a nail polish collection. I feel like it just elevates it so much. I think this one definitely does it really well. Even if as a collection, it might not look super cohesive, I feel like the polishes individually really can hold their own. Like I already mentioned during the voiceover portion of my swatches, I have a lot of favorites from this lineup. It's just hard to narrow it down, and no surprise, I'm gonna love the shimmers because they're just so ethereal. I know that these are still very new, but I feel like Witch Hazel and After the Rain especially are new favorite Mooncats, like of all time. They are just so gorgeous, but I still really enjoyed some of the darker, moodier colors like Fields of Lavender or Dark Night of the Soul especially. They just really resonate, especially with the names. And I'm really surprised with how much I loved Sagebrush because I feel like I give thermals a hard time for just having a shorter shelf life, but that one is just so stunning. I cannot get over how perfect both of the transition colors are. And initially seeing it, I thought it was gonna be a dupe for Devil's Ivy, but I feel like I like this one even more. So if you're interested in this collection, it is available now on Mooncat's website, which is linked in my description box. It's not limited edition, so it is here to stay, and I just can't wait to hear if you're going to be picking any of these up, or just let me know down below what some of your favorites are so we can chat about it. But I hope that you liked this video. Thank you so much for watching, and a big thank you to Mooncat again for sponsoring this video, and I will catch you all in the next one. Bye!